I'm the bad guy. I'm the bad.
So the opening week of the NFL season was full of high drama and incredible games. Week 2 came along and said, hold my beer, in what was again an incredible weekend of NFL action. Welcome back to Across the Gridiron. I am Matt Charles, and I'm once again joined by my friend and yours, Eddie Equo. Eddie, before we jump straight into Cowboys Corner, let's just have a little bit of reflection of the weekend as a whole. That was an incredible weekend of football action, wasn't it?
It was an incredible weekend of football. And I've just hit my mic mute button. It was an incredible
Starting strong.
Starting strong. I love the NFL. Drama at the highest. It was just fascinating. I think like every game that you turned into, there was just some amount of drama that was going on. Whether it was a Cowboys game, whether it was a Bengals game, whether it was a Patriots game, the Colts game, even the Chiefs and the Eagles, it was just all around action packed. And the NFL must be sitting down smiling out like, we just created this. This is like a proud parent looking at the baby and be like, wow, I can't believe I made this. The commissioner must be licking his lips and just thinking, if this is how the rest of the NFL season is going to be like, we're in for a treat. It was great. Absolutely enjoyed it. Players were making plays, field goal kickers were doing the thing that they normally do, missing field goals and causing dramatic endings. No, Matt, it was great. It was great. And Cowboys definitely made me lose a few pounds, over that game or yesterday. I mean, what a game.
Yeah, well, let's not beat around the bush here. Let's go straight into our weekly episode of Cowboys Corner, and let's talk about that. What is, without hyperbole, that was the game of the weekend. It really was an absolutely sensational game. I can't even remember what the final score was. It was 40-37. The Cowboys won in overtime in an incredible back and forth game. We got to the 2-minute warning in the fourth quarter, and weren't the Giants leading about 30-27 going into the 2-minute warning?
It was.
It was an incredible game. And when I watch games, I watch the red zone. Yeah, I try and take it as much as I can. And obviously, at the same time that was happening, the Dolphins were capitulating against the Patriots. So I had kind of had my eye on that, but also you could not take your eyes off what was going on with the Cowboys and Giants. I mean, Eddie, look, I'm just going to sit back for a while and let you take people through it. Not only take us through, you don't have to take us through all the action per se. Just take us through, from your experience as a fan, some of the key points in that game and what it felt like.
I mean, if you are not a fan of the Dallas Cowboys,
which most people aren't. Yeah, most people aren't.
Most people were just like, oh my goodness, this is popcorn, right? Everybody was looking like MVP, at least the offense, right? The offense was just looking tremendous. As a Cowboy fan, I got into that game and I was incredibly worried because the Cowboys start the first drive, go nowhere quickly, right? So the Giants, go up and down, which was kind of funny in that game because the left tackle had 4 penalties in the first drive. So they had to bench the guy, right? Literally benched him for the whole game. I think he had like a personal, foul, 15 yards. Then he had a false start. Then he had another personal one. Then he had another false start. I think the coach was like, hey, dude, you are not going to cost me my job in this game. So literally benched the guy. And I think that probably turned that game for the Giants because they were matching up and down the Cowboys and could have scored 6, ended up with 3. And Cowboys had another drive, 3 and out, and it's like, oh my goodness, what's going on? And then the Giants go on and then they score. And at that point, I'm sitting there and I'm thinking to myself, all the emotions of, Jerry Jones, Micah Parsons in Green Bay Packers, and just watching that defense make Russell Wilson look like Tom Brady, Patrick Mahomes, and looking like the Russell Wilson from the Super Bowl, era. This is how comfortable he was. There was no pass rush whatsoever. But the thing that frustrated me was I'm a fan. I'm watching the game, and I'm like, you got to look out for Malik Neighbors. And the next thing you know, he's catching a ball deep. And I'm like, for goodness sake, I know he's the danger man. Other teams look at the Cowboys and they're like, it's CD, right? 2-4 players on CD. I mean, there were a couple of catches CD made up for the first game, right, where he dropped a couple of balls because he made some ridiculous catches, in that, fourth quarter, overtime, to keep the Dallas Cowboys in this game. So fair play. There was one of those plays where he was like, there were like 3 players around him. He still went up, got the ball, came down. I was like, that's the kind of, performance I want to see from CD. But everyone knows that Malik Neighbors is that dude. I think the guy went for over 170 or so yards, in that game, which is ridiculous. So the Cowboy defense, every time I'm turning around, there goes a wide receiver from, the Giants just buzzing past a Cowboy player. And I'm like, what are you doing? Are you watching him? It's like he's just gone past you. And time after time, even when you thought it wasn't going to happen in the fourth quarter, when Russell Wilson went deep, to Donnell Robinson, I think that's his name, went deep, first of all, to Malik Neighbors, then he caught that, almost did an Odell Beckham, thing, catch in the end zone. And then you had Donald Roberts, almost the same play. Like when we were watching our game, right? And someone scores a goal, and then they score another goal exact same way, and you're like, hold on, what are the defenders doing? Like, literally, that is how this guy scored the first goal, and you let him score the second goal again. This is how the Cowboys behaved. And honestly, I'm sitting there, I'm thinking to myself, we're gonna lose this game. We're gonna lose this game. And as soon as the Giants in the fourth quarter took 25 seconds to go back and score, I was like, are you kidding me? 25 seconds. Because the Cowboys scored, and then it was like 50 something, seconds on the clock. And I'm like, okay, this game is done. Giants need a touchdown because every time the Cowboys scored a touchdown, the Giants always needed a touchdown. They couldn't score a field goal, to bring the game to par. So they needed a touchdown. I was like, 50 something seconds. Come on. This is not Joe Burrow. This is not Patrick Mahomes. This is not Tom Brady. What are we talking about? This is not Aaron Rodgers, because Aaron Rodgers done that to the Cowboys, so many times. So I'm thinking to myself, it's Russell Wilson. I know he's looked good, but he's not going to do that. And boom, the guy throws the ball into the basket. I'm like, oh my goodness. Oh, but 25 seconds. So honestly, I'm thinking to myself, why am I putting myself through this kind of pain, right? Thankfully, this was a 6:00 game, because I don't know what it would have been if it was a 9:00 game that would have been finishing about 12 midnight. And today is Monday, for us in the UK. If you don't know, we're watching this game from the UK, so time zones and all of that, and then Dak Prescott was like, listen, I've been in this situation so many times. Just stay calm, follow my lead. I'll show you how it was done. Overtime comes in. The Cowboys get the drive. They go nowhere fast, right? And I'm thinking, oh goodness, couldn't even get a score, right? So next thing, Giants come in. Then they go nowhere fast. So I'm thinking, okay, this is gonna be interesting. Then the Cowboys get the ball again, and then they do nothing. And I'm like, you don't get more than 2 chances in overtime, so Giants are definitely gonna win this. And then what does Russell Wilson do? He throws an interception, just on cue. And I'm like, thank goodness. Because as soon as he did that, I was like, yeah, Brandon Aubrey, it's time, right? And think about that 64 yards to tie the game into overtime. honestly, I wasn't worried that he wasn't going to kick it, right? I didn't think that he wasn't going to make it. But I just, in my head, because of all the, nervousness, you're thinking, if there's a time that he's going to miss and he's been so accurate, this is that one time because so much is riding on it. This guy was the coolest guy in the stadium. He didn't look any different from how he normally kicks. And I'm like, how do you do that? And it's not like when he swings his leg, it looks like he's really whacking it. It's almost like he doesn't even put any energy into it. Honestly, this guy is just something sensational, right? And a little thing there, I've got him in my fantasy, and he gave me 23 points, just him alone. Now, let's not talk about the rest of my fantasy team because they're all rubbish. But if, let's say, the other players, did their part, I could have been winning my fantasy this week. I know I'm going to lose because who did I have? I had Justin Fields, and he had 3 points. I digress. The Cowboys put on a show, and the Cowboys could have been 0-2, 2-0, but now they are 1-1, and I'll take it.
Okay. That was a very short and subtle recountment of the game, Eddie. I like it. So I'm going to play devil's advocate for you.
Yeah.
And I'm just going to rain on your parade, piss on your chips, whatever you want to call it. Yes, you won, right? Congratulations. Yeah. You are 1-1. You are off the board. You probably beat arguably the worst team in the league. Right? Okay. I mean, that's nothing against the Giants. They are a lot of people's picks to potentially be the worst team in the league this season. You scraped by. You scraped by, right? And you said there before, you made Russell Wilson look like the elite level quarterback he was many years ago. What was it? What do we say? So he threw for 450 yards and 3 touchdowns. He was absolutely bombing. The defense did not even want to even bother trying to track Neighbors, let alone try and tackle the guy. You took if Russell Wilson was more consistent, he wouldn't have thrown that interception. That was a bizarre throw in the circumstance. He was nowhere near. I think it was Neighbors who was going for again. It's a costly interception. So you have scraped through by the barest of margins against a poor team. But you're there, right? Do you look at this and think, right, okay, look, we have been great going forward against albeit a weak defense, or do you look at it and think, we still don't look like a particularly good team? What if you look at it dispassionately for a little bit? Are you looking at this as a really, really positive thing, or a little bit of a we got away with one there?
I mean, listen, Cowboy fans, we don't do dispassionate, right? We're always winning the Super Bowl every season. Listen, of course I have to be concerned about our defense, right? It was always going to be the case when you trade away, your best players, right? It was always going to be that a quarterback that can sit in the pocket was going to do something to you. And quarterbacks that now, initially our problem was quarterbacks that run, and throw. We had a problem because we just couldn't stop the run. And we saw that in the first game. Jalen Hurts was doing what he wanted every time he picked the ball and ran. And now we've got problems with quarterbacks that sit in the pocket and they have time, to throw, because our secondary is not very good. Darren Bland got injured just before the game. So you had, Trevor Diggs, and they were actually going against him. And then Elam was another, cornerback as well, who was absolutely, I think going into week 3, or at least this Monday Night Football, I heard that he's led in the most yards in the first 2 games, right? Almost 300 yards to receivers. So it does concern me, but hey, right? Didn't we say this about the Eagles last season? Where they were playing teams and making them look like Super Bowl contenders, scraping wins, and eventually ended up in the Super Bowl. Not saying that's going to happen to the Cowboys, but in week 1, the Eagles played us close, right? And everyone was thinking, well, the Cowboys are not as bad, as everyone thought they were, because here is the Eagles, and they're still playing us close. So maybe this is just the first 2 games of the season where it is very hard to judge teams. And we're going to go into our overreaction segments, and then we've got some really good ones for you guys. So you need to look out for that video. But maybe this is just what happens in week 2. Maybe this is week 2 where not all the units are working properly. And certainly for the Cowboys, they had to adjust, trading their best player 4 or 5 games before the start of the season. So I am concerned, but at the same time, I feel like we've got something in our offense. I feel like Dak Prescott will keep this team afloat until they figure out something in the defense.
Well, look, it was important to get the first win under a new coach. Maybe it's something that you can build on for the season.
Yeah.
But it did show that there are areas that need improving. It was a must-win game, right? It was a must-win game, I think, and you came through it. And we'll talk about another team who had a must-win game and lost. Clue, I am wearing their baseball cap at the moment, but we'll come on to that. But let's move on to the next game we want to look at. This is going to be, week 2 actually threw up the Super Bowl rematch last season when the Philadelphia Eagles traveled to the Kansas City Chiefs. Now, if you remember in the playoffs, Eddie, this was an absolute blowout in the end with Eagles, your beloved Philadelphia Eagles, taking home the Vince Lombardi Trophy. This time it was a little bit closer, but Philadelphia Eagles went to Arrowhead Stadium and they came away with a 2017 victory. Now, you can look at this sort of 2 ways. Another good solid victory for the Eagles. Chiefs now moved down to 0-2. They have lost 3 competitive games in a row now, right? This doesn't happen under Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes. But it was a close game. Mahomes looked like he was back to his best in certain plays.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, the Eagles ran out victorious. What do you make of this game?
I think Mahomes is now a miracle worker. He's not going to turn stone to bread. And certainly that's what was needed to beat the Eagles. I have to commend the Chiefs for keeping that game close. And I think both defenses showed why they're probably the top 2 defenses in the league right now. Kansas City Chiefs held the Philadelphia Eagles to 20 points, right? And that in itself is saying something. We're talking about the Philadelphia Eagles and have got AJ Brown, they've got Devonta Smith, they've got Saquon Barkley, running all over the place. But this Eagles team they've patented a way of winning that we've never seen before in the NFL, and a way that is probably hard to replicate, because it seems like they find a way to win and nobody looks good, right? Nobody in that offense, look decent. Jalen Hurts hasn't thrown a touchdown this season in 2 games, right? But he's won those 2 games. Saquon Barkley hasn't looked like the 2,000-yard running back, of last season, right? And they've won those 2 games. In 2 games, AJ Brown has probably had 5 targets, right? You say all those things, and the next thing you're supposed to say is, this is why they lost. But instead, you're saying this is we don't know how they've won because they've won the game. So I don't know how long they can keep it up. But clearly, they've done this for a whole season and gone to the Super Bowl and then played their best game in the Super Bowl. So maybe the plan for the before I said the Super Eagles, the plan for the Eagles is to play crap, take the win, and make it to the Super Bowl. Which for Saquon Barkley, he must be thinking to himself, you could have just let me get that record.
I'm sure his Super Bowl ring that he's wearing probably. We've had this discussion. I think that I'm sure Barkley prefers to have the Super Bowl ring than the record. Surely.
Yeah, no, he does. But it's good to have the record too. Something like, I mean, everybody wants the golden boot. You want a golden boot, and then you want your team to win as well. For the Chiefs, so let's just talk about the Chiefs for a second because. Patrick Mahomes, like you said, he looked okay. He looked like himself. Travis Kelce made a crucial lapse in judgment error. Call it what you want, concentration, because Travis Kelce is that guy, right? He always, makes those plays, and for that play in the end zone, you could almost put your house on it that it was a touchdown, right?
Yep.
And to bounce off his hand into an interception is not Travis Kelce. It's not how he does things. So he made big plays in that game, right? I still remember the play that he had, where he even gave the guy a stiff hand, all the way, and all of that. The Chiefs running back room, Pacheco, Hunt. I mean, Hunt, there was a time when he was electric, but I think it's a bit like when the Cowboys brought Ezekiel Elliott back. Sometimes, running backs, you just get to that point where they can't hit those explosiveness the way that they used to because they're just older, right? They've had too many hits in the body. And then Hollywood Brown, tried as much as he could. And I was surprised because I thought that the Chiefs were going to get somebody in, before that game because, Rashee Rice is injured. Juju Smith-Schuster is not who he was anymore. He's a complimentary player that, maybe is good for a play or two, but he's not going to be the one that you're going to be trusting, right? And so, the Chiefs had Travis Kelce as the most reliable, player for them to get the ball to. And that turnover led to the Eagles scoring. And ultimately, I think that turnover is what decided the game. The Chiefs will be fine, I think. I know that your snap judgment last week was they were not going to play.
It's looking good at the moment, and it's looking good at the moment.
Good, right? That my dear friend is looking very good as a thing that just comes into reality. But I want to say that I remember the Patriots, doing this a couple of times, starting 0-2, in the season and then ending up in the Super Bowl. The Chiefs will have to prove it to us by not making the playoffs and continuing to be inspired. I mean, Rashee Rice is coming back. He was 6 games suspended, so they've got 4 more games to try and get a win. So if they end the stretch, of 6 games, and if they're 3-3, that's not a bad record after 6 games. You're still 500, and you've got 10 games to play minimum, right? So it means that you can still run the table. If you go ahead and win 8 of those 10 games, that's still an 11-win season. And that might be good enough. Although, as I'm saying this, I'm thinking about the teams that are in that division, who started very well. We're going to talk about some of them later, the Chargers, and the Raiders who play tonight, whether that we are recording. So it's gonna be. I think one thing we can say is that the Chiefs are not just gonna walk away into that division. Like they're not gonna just win that division by default. They're going to have to earn their way into the playoffs.
No, absolutely not. I think that there's a couple of things I think you pointed out, and it was a game-changing, monumental mistake by Travis Kelce that ultimately cost the Chiefs that game. Right, the Eagles once again didn't play well, and they won. And a good, they get to go in, correct some mistakes after a win, which is a really positive thing for a team to be able to do. But it's how long are you able to do that? And yeah, look, the Chiefs did stuff, did okay in certain places. But I just want to bring up a couple of stats, which makes my prediction that they could be one and done in the playoffs. Pretty looks pretty good, and I can't find these stats now. But I think basically he was saying that in the entire of the Chiefs' history, they have been 0-2 15 times in their career. On only one occasion they made the playoffs in that time. So I'm just saying, I might be completely wrong. They might not even make the playoffs. It was a fascinating game. It was fascinating that the fixture computer threw up this game. I think it's too early in the season to tell as much about the two teams, though.
It is.
If this was 5 or 6 weeks in, I think would be a different boat. But the Eagles won. Chiefs couldn't have had a Super Bowl playoffs. We move on. And yeah, so do we. So let's move on to the third game we want to touch on now. And this was an absolutely fascinating game at Lucas Oil Stadium. Denver Broncos 28, and the Colts 29. We talked about Russell Wilson looking like prime Tom Brady, but again, Daniel Jones. We talked about it last week.
Yeah.
And how he looked so good, with the huge caveat that he was playing against the Miami Dolphins. Right. So I've never played quarterback in my life. I think I might have looked pretty decent against that Miami Dolphins team last week. But fair play, he led the team to an absolutely blowout game. And again, he led his team to victory again. And a really interesting stat that he's the first quarterback in the Super Bowl era to have 2 games when he hasn't had to, where his team haven't had to punt the ball away. That's an incredible level of consistency he showed in these first 2 games. But the story of this game is not Daniel Jones. It is Denver having won the match.
Yes.
Somehow still managed to lose the match. So Eddie, like you did with the Cowboys game, just take the good folks listening to this through exactly what the hell happened in the last couple seconds of that game.
Listen, if someone said, this is what happened in that game, you'll be like, no. This is like, one of those things where you've watched the movie before. You know how the movie ends, right? So you tell all your mates, I went to see this movie. It was incredible. This happened, that happened. This is how the movie ended. And then you go into the movie cinema with your friends, and you're watching it, and then the movie ends completely differently, and you're like, wait, hold on a second, that doesn't happen. Once you've made a movie, the ending is the ending. You don't go and watch it the second time and then the ending is completely different. This game, I was watching this game and I was like, seeing Daniel Jones, he played well in the game. I have nothing at stake other than the fact that we predicted this game. So I was like cheering the Colts on. But Denver Broncos were doing things. They were making waves. They were making plays. Bo Nix was looking a little bit decent. The Denver defense was okay, but the Colts defense, though, oh my goodness. I'm thinking to myself, what is going on here? This Colts, they were just having turnover over turnover, in that game. I think they had 3 turnovers at the end of that game. And I'm like, okay, something is clearly happening to the Colts. Daniel Jones has brought a little bit of the New York, excitement into the cold, windy city. And then this game, right, literally. So they marched down with a few seconds to go to the game, right? And Denver Broncos, scored the last point, and you're like, right, okay. Now there is no way that the Colts are gonna win this game, right? So they march down the field, and Schrader comes out. He's the kicker, for the Colts. Lines up, does the thing. I don't know. Kickers always do this thing. They do this thing, and then at the end of the day, still miss it. I'm like, what was all that all about? It's all the bit of hyping up, increasing the intensity, and then ending up not kicking it right. So the guy does that, and the buzzer is going right, all the way to 0. Kicks it, misses it, right? So you look at the end, the end zone, and you see the official doing this, and that means he missed it. And I'm like, oh, the game's over, right? I'm already, thinking, Denver Broncos. Sean Payton already looking very happy, about to walk to the middle of the field, to do the customary shake hands. And then the zebras come out. And like, no, hold on. There's the flag. A yellow flag. I'm like, what flag? What's going on? Who did what? And I'm thinking to myself, surely someone didn't jump offside, because you don't do that, right? So, and then they show the replay, and I'm like, oh my goodness, they're gonna call this. They're definitely going to call it. A Broncos player, normally, right, when you sort of like set up for the kick, right? You're supposed to maintain the line of scrimmage, right? You can't cross that line until the kicker has kicked the ball, right? So, and I think there's something about, not going over the people who are, sort of in that scrum. You can't go over them.
It was leverage, wasn't it? He was pushing
Yeah,
himself up.
he was pushing himself up. And the poor guy, and he'll probably be thinking to himself, I just cost my team, this game. And literally the buzzer was done. The referee said, no, not quite yet. Let's come back and kick it. And as soon as that happened, I was like, he's gonna make it. He's gonna make it now. And just as we thought, he comes in, does the hand thing again, and kicks it through the upright. And that's how the Colts literally won a game that 3 seconds ago they had literally lost. Unbelievable sequence of events. And that just goes to show how kickers are important in the league.
Oh, absolutely. Without question, it's a position. It's one of the positions that can potentially do the least in the game. Kickers get get the least respect in the football. They're the kicker. The kickers don't get the girls, do they? Let's be honest.
No.
But they can win and lose a game, and in this case, the Colts kick certainly won that game for Denver. Or, well, I say Denver threw it away. I mean, that was the main talking point of that game. Yeah. So, absolutely incredible. So let's move on to the final game we want to touch on the most. And trust me, we are going to go through this as quickly as possible because I said, in the AFC East divisional game, the New England Patriots traveling to the Miami Dolphins. I said last week this was a must-win game for Miami. And once again, they found a way to lose it. New England, Drake Maye probably had the game of his career. Fair play to him. As New York come away with a 33-27 victory over Miami, who again just didn't seem to be able to get things going. The key thing for me, well, let's talk about the highlight of the game first, which was something that never happens. Yeah. Back-to-back kickoff returns. Right. You just do not see it. So I was actually tweeting or Xting or whatever the bloody hell you call it these days. Malik Washington, I think it was 60 or 70-yard kick return. Yeah. Unbelievable. Miami take the lead. Superb. Kickoff. Go. I don't even want to know the guy's name at the Patriots. It was a 90-yard return, and we're back to where we were again. And it was just with Miami, we started slow. We were 12 points down, managed to take the lead, yet we still throw it away. And it's funny, you know, when you watch games, when you watch like Josh Allen at the Bills or Mahomes at the Patriots in the past, there are games when you could be down by a score. You could be down by 3 or down by 6, down by 7. You're in the fourth quarter and there's a minute left on the clock. You still fancy that team to go on and win the game. You know, we have seen Mahomes, we have seen Allen, we've seen, you know, Jackson win games in impossible situations. The Dolphins had, I think they, Tua had the ball. There was probably about 2 minutes left, 6%. Never once did I think we were scoring. Never once. There was no level of inevitability that we were going to go on and win that game, and we didn't. There was a sack, ended it all. And obviously, you know, our friend Matt, our New England Patriots correspondent, messaged me. And you know how we were saying we were saying when we interviewed him a couple of weeks ago about all the Super Bowl wins and that kind of stuff. He messaged me and said that was better than any of the Super Bowl wins. I'm like, oh God. I think because he knows me and him have a whiskey bet. So at the moment I own half a bottle of whiskey at the moment. And but yeah, it was terrible. And Miami sink to Norton 2. It's not looking good. We've got Bills next week, and then there's like then we've got an 11-day break before we play again. Yeah. McDaniel doesn't look long for this role. I'm going to sort of again try and be a little bit quiet for a bit because obviously I'm just going to get worked up. But from a neutral perspective, Eddie, how did you see it? And obviously at the time you had your eyes glued to the Cowboys game that was going on at the same time, of course.
I did. Obviously I had the red zone, on, but I won't lie, my nervousness, was allowing me to focus on the Cowboys. But I did go back, to watch this game because obviously there was a lot of interest. I was keeping an eye on the game, as well. And I was like, oh, Daniel Jones looks good. Look at that. And then turn around and see HN running. I was like, oh, HN looks like he's back, right? So, I mean, Daniel Jones, he was 22 of 29, which is really good for a quarterback. 272 yards. He ran for 2 touchdowns, threw for 1, no turnovers. He only had 1 sack. They scored on all 7 of their possessions, touchdowns or field goals. That's ridiculous, right? That's ridiculous. Their tight end, Tyler Warren, he looked great. He made some really incredible catches in that game. For Miami, I just feel like the turnovers is what killed them. The turnovers. Especially when you have them very early on in the game, right? And as we've just said, the Colts, every possession they turned it into points. So every time you had a turnover, it was almost like, oh goodness, they're gonna score. That can be demoralizing, right? As a team, right? So then you've got the 2 interceptions by Tua. He lost the fumble. He took 3 sacks. Your offensive line was not looking good at all. And for you to manage only 211 total yards in the whole game, right? When teams are like, doing 300, 400 yards, clearly you started a little bit, late. You didn't get into the game until late, and you could argue that, a lot of, the yards probably came in the later part of the game. And then you had that touchdown, the screen pass to Devon Achane, to score that touchdown in the fourth quarter. But for me, last week I was talking about, the Tyreek Hill, because he didn't feature at all in this game. It was almost like as if he was non-existent. And we're talking about, what removing him from being the captain might have an adverse effect on the team. I don't know whether that's lingering. Obviously, I'm just speculating here. We're just clutching for what could be the reason why the Dolphins are performing like this. Or maybe are we just overreacting? As we said, this is the first two games. But you watch that game and you kind of think, how are they going to get better? Right? How are they going to get better when the quarterback is not playing well? The offensive line is not playing well. So maybe you're thinking, do you trade for a player that comes in and helps them a little bit? You're giving up turnovers to the next team. These are all recipes, for disaster, right? And turnovers can be infectious. It can be infectious. You go on a run of having turnovers, and then you're like, you can't stop because you're almost seeming like, okay, it can happen at any point in time. So there are things that they definitely need to clean up, and they need to clean up quickly, right? Before you then start to lose players, and then that starts to compound things. But I think your biggest issue, you need to fix whatever is the problem with Tyreek Hill, because he's supposed to be one of your most productive players. And we saw in previous season when Tua and Tyreek had that connection, Tyreek was almost going for over 1,500 yards, in the season. So has that connection been broken? Right. We were talking about Justin Fields, and Garrett Wilson, in that first game where you could see the chemistry between the quarterback and the wide receiver. And we always say that, you see, wide receivers and quarterbacks that have good chemistry, see what they can do, right? See what the Lions are doing, Amon-Ra, and Goff, right? Cowboys are doing CD Lamb, and Dak Prescott. You need to have chemistry with your wide receiver. And I think that's missing, and that needs to be fixed for me for the Dolphins.
Well, yeah, I mean, if I try and look at it dispassionately, if this Sunday's game wasn't anywhere near as bad as the first game, right? You talk about Hill. Hill was still our most productive player in terms of yards. He ended with 109 yards off six receptions. Our total yards, we actually got more total yards in the game than the Patriots. The total yards are 358 versus 333 from the Patriots. So we were certainly more productive. The run game looked good at certain times. Tua was a lot more productive. He finished with 26 out of 32 passing and then 315 yards. So there were certain times we certainly looked a lot better. The problem is, for me, the biggest problem is the defense at the moment, right? Yeah. We let the Colts score every single possession, right, last week. We then let the Patriots score off their first three possessions on Saturday to go 12-0 down.
Yeah.
If you are basically every time that the opposition has the ball, they score, that's going to make it incredibly challenging for the offense. There's a lot of pressure that's going to be put on them. And look, they did look better as the game went on. As I said, I still watching the final few plays, I had no confidence they were going to go through, and that's just me being a pessimistic fan. And McDaniel C is it's getting, if it was hot before the game, it's getting almost burning now. And we go away to the Bills on Thursday Night Football. I'm not confident that we're going to come away with a victory in that one, but let's put those sort of four games aside now. Let's sort of just talk about some of the other major things that we noticed in this week. So rather than talk about individual games, let's talk about some of the key moments. And I think that the bit where we're going to start on is some teams are actually going to be looking pretty shaky at quarterback over the next couple of weeks, because there were three teams especially who lost their starting QB during the games last week. were amply supported by their backups. So obviously we had Joe Burrow going down for the Cincinnati Bengals, and he had turf toe, which now requires surgery. So he could be out for, I think, for 3 months of diagnosis. So that could really put pay to the Bengals' whole season potentially. Brock Purdy went down for the 49ers, but Mac Jones stepped up and the 49ers still able to win that game. Brock Purdy could be out for 5 or 6 weeks. And of course, the other one was Jayden Daniels went down for the Commanders. So you've got 3 teams there who have lost their quarterbacks on Sunday. Now, I mean, Eddie, just from your perspective, out of the 3 of them, which teams do you think are going to suffer the most from losing that quarterback?
It's a toss-up between the Bengals and the Commanders. I think the 49ers will be fine. They will be fine because we've seen this movie before, right? Kyle Shanahan takes a quarterback that no one really thinks can do anything and then takes them to the championship game. So I think he's one of the best quarterback coaches. And I wanted to say it in a different way. He's one of the best coaches for quarterbacks. I think that's what I wanted to say, because I haven't really seen a bad quarterback that has played for Kyle Shanahan. Now, I think Sam Darnold was there, and maybe he bucked that train a little bit. But Sam Darnold has redeemed himself by going to the Vikings and playing almost as an MVP before the bottom fell out at the end of the season. But Kyle Shanahan has got this thing of, if I can have a good, solid defense, and we said that Robert Saleh, when we're previewing the season, we said Robert Saleh going to the 49ers was going to make them better defensively. Because sometimes, some coaches are better as coordinators rather than coaches. We saw that with Dan Quinn before he got another chance with the Commanders. So Saleh, has done incredibly well, because the 49ers defense looks so much more better than they were last season. I know that probably is because of the injuries that they had, and they've got Fred Warner was playing very well yesterday, as well. Mac Jones came in and settled in, threw for 3 touchdowns. He looked great, right? Now, I think the Bengals are probably the one that I worry the most, because they traditionally always started slow. And this year we thought, after winning that first game with Joe Burrow on the saddle, they're going to do things, right? And then you have this injury that is coming. Now, of course, the starting quarterback came in, and did what he was supposed to do. But I don't know how sustainable that is going forward, right? Is he going to have the magic that Joe Burrow has? I'm not sure he is. And we already know how that division is very tough. You've got the Browns, you've got the Ravens, you've got the Steelers in that division. So it's going to be difficult if they don't have a good start to the season. So I'm worried about the Bengals, but I think the team that probably might just top that is the Commanders, right? Because they've got Marcus Mariota, who can come in and play. And he's been an okay quarterback. I remember his time in Tennessee, Titans, he was decent there. But he's not someone that really scares anyone. Although having said that, though, I've seen him come in and the one-off games he has performed, right? And he's still able to run, still able to do things. And the Commanders have got players, like Terry McLaurin, Deebo Samuel in fact, Deebo Samuel has actually become like the number 1 wide receiver for the Commanders, because he's been getting a lot of the ball and the productivity as well. But I just worry about them because, everything was all about Jayden Daniels, what he brought to the team, the spark that he brought life, injected life into the team. He made people want to, look at the Commanders. It made people optimistic about their prospects, going into the season. And without him there for a considerable amount of time, can they hang in, until he comes back? And if he comes back, is he going to be the same? Because it's reported to be something around his knee. And those things, for quarterbacks, it's not even just physically, coming back from it. It's just the mental thing. Can you trust it if you get a tackle, if you get a sack? And you know how the NFL is. The players would, they're going to try things. And of course, the quarterbacks are protected. So you can't really tackle them. But you can tackle them low. You just can't tackle them high. And of course, tackling them low is where the knee is. So, yeah, I think that's for me is, do they rush him back? If they're not winning games, in 2 games time, do they try and accelerate that? I don't remember when they have their bye, which might be something that could help them. But I worry for the Commanders as much as any of those teams that we're talking about that have lost their quarterback.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's the Bengals. I mean, I think that Jake Browning has been an able deputy. Burrows went out in the second quarter, and Browning helped lead the Bengals to a win, which is great, and he is an able deputy. But given where the Bengals want to be, I feel that they need to be this season. They need a fully fit Burrows. Yeah. The only positive way of looking at this could be that basically Burrows has 3-4 months out, but he gets back just in time for the playoffs or to take the team to the playoffs. What the Bengals are going to hope is that they're not out of contention before Burrows even comes back. And again, I feel sorry for Burrows. I mean, he's looking at reality now. He's had 6 seasons in the NFL now. In 3 of those seasons, he's had a long injury layoff.
Yeah.
He's tore his ACL, he snapped ligament in his wrist, and now he's done ligaments in his toe, right? And they are long-term layoffs. If he wants to live up to the potential that everybody thinks he's got, he has to try and stay healthy. And there's nothing you can do about these. Nothing you can do about these things. He will be determined, and he's going to come back fitter and stronger and better. But this is a big blow for the Bengals. This is a big season of promise for them. And in week 2, they're already looking like it could potentially be not a difficult season for them, but living up to his expectations look like it's going to be a bit difficult. But let's move on to some of the other things that we've looked at. The one thing I just want to bring up, and again, I thought this was hilarious. I think the contest is over now for play of the season, touchdown of the season, and we saw that without question at the Steelers Seahawks game. So for those who haven't seen this, it was brilliant, right? So there was 30 minutes left in the fourth quarter. From the kickoff, just trying to remember what it was. So from the Seahawks kickoff, it was going to Steelers rookie Caleb Johnson. He was going to field the ball to run it back, but he decided to leave it. But what he hadn't realized is that he made slight contact with the ball. The ball bounced over his head, and it just trundled into the end zone, which allowed Seahawks George Halloumi to recover it for the touchdown. And to much the shock of everybody, nobody really knew what was going on, let alone the Steelers players, let alone poor Caleb Johnson. And Seahawks are celebrating a touchdown that gave him a 10-point lead, which ultimately helped him win the game. Obviously, they ended up going and winning 31-17 at the end. But this is when the score was 17-14. This touchdown really took the game away from Steelers, which I thought was absolutely hilarious. And I'm not doing it justice. If you haven't seen it, guys, go and watch it. You can give me your tight games and your last minute field goals. It's brain farts like this to make the NFL worth watching.
This was like some mothers do have them. For those that are not familiar with that, this was a British comedy back in the 80s. Was it the 80s, or was it in the
some of us do have them? That was
Frank Spencer's.
I mean, I've got to say, Eddie, we are really showing our age. We are really showing up-to-date reference here for the kids, aren't we?
But I tell you what, go and Google some mothers to halftime if you want to watch something that is just so comical that it makes you cry and laugh, at the same time. That is
This is insane. There have been so many better comedy outlets since some of us do have them. Jesus, I mean, we are really zoning in on this young demographic. Yeah, if we ever move on to TikTok, I probably would lead with this clip. Maybe we do a watch along one day, Eddie.
Oh, it would be absolutely brilliant. So Caleb Johnson, right, for the Steelers, God bless him, is a rookie, right? So he's tasked, for fielding that kick, right? So the ball, and at the time, I didn't really understand what happened because I thought the ball, because he had his hand, right, and then it was almost like his hand was kind of frozen, and the ball just kind of did that kind of thing over his helmet. And I thought, okay, nothing to it, because he now starts jogging away, from the play, like like nothing happened. It's like, oh, it's gonna go to the end zone for a touchback, right? Which is kind of like what you do, like when you don't touch it, you're like, okay, my part's done, easy day at the job. I'm gonna run back to the sidelines and let the other guys, who need to do all the heavy lifting, they go pick the ball and continue with that. But no, so the thing bounces, off his head, gets into the end zone, and then George Holani, Seahawks special teams, or he's trying to get into the team. He's breaking his neck, to get into the end zone. This is why they always say in the NFL that you always play like until the play is dead, whistle dead, because you just never know what could happen. So he's breaking his neck into the end zone, dives on the ball, and kind of like scoops it into the end zone, down to a rollover for effect. And the rest of the gang join him in the end zone. And next thing we know is like touchdown. And I'm like, really? Is that really a touchdown? Now, I think there's some confusion, about this rule, right? So the whole new kickoff rule is that the ball needs to bounce in the landing zone, right? Which is between the 5 and the 20-yard line, on a kickoff, right? So, and if it doesn't land in the landing zone, I think they say that the ball is live, right? So the returner can field it or let it roll. So if it ends up in the end zone without being down or touched in certain ways, and then the kicking team player can recover it, for a touchdown. So I'm just like, okay, so he must have been thinking, right? It would be a touchback, so the play will be dead. Steelers will start at the 25 or 30 something. I can't remember now. Or assume someone, and I don't know, or even worse, did he assume that somebody else would deal with it? But the shortness of the story is that he did nothing. He didn't do anything either.
For me, it was a nonchalant just walk back to the middle. It's like, it's fine. Despite you've got all these Seahawk players running past it. To get the live ball, but
Mike Tomlin said it was poor judgment by a young player, and I mean it's a little bit harsh, but I mean
he'll never do it again. He will never do it again.
He will never do it again. But I mean, listen, every season, we have, something that happens. Like, I mean, there were times that we'll see players who were like in the 2 minutes offense, where you're supposed to like, catch the ball and go out of bounds. You sometimes you see a player catch the ball and then celebrating a first down instead of running back, to give the ball to the referee, so that the team can play and, cost teams points. Sometimes you see, players who score a touchdown too quickly, and give time to the other team to march down and then, score a touchdown and win the game. So yeah, it's incredibly sad. I hope that he doesn't get too punished, for that mistake, and ends up not getting lots of opportunities to show what he can do. But yeah, that was kind of funny.
Oh, it was very funny. Okay, so let's leave week 2 now in the rear view mirror and look ahead to week 3. Obviously, we've already had a bit. This recording's already been a bit of a long one, so let's just try and rattle through some of these, Eddie. Obviously, we're going to be back later in the week with our predictions and our score predictions for sort of 5 selected games. But just for now, let's just look ahead now, just to pick out some of the games that we're looking forward to. Let's start with the Monday Night Football game, the Lions at the Ravens. Is there anything in particular you're looking forward to in this way? Obviously, these are two heavyweight teams up against each other again early on in the season. The fixture computer's been very kind to us this season in terms of some of the early games that we've seen.
Yeah, so I mean, these are two teams that already this season have scored over 40 points. So it's going to be interesting to see, whether this is just going to be just a gung ho offense game, where it will be you get a touchdown, I get a touchdown, you get a touchdown, I get a touchdown. Clearly both teams, have got weapons, and maybe the demise of the Lions was a bit too presumptuous, right? We had already buried them, after week 1, thinking that, they're not going to show us anything. And then they were like, okay, here's what we do. We're just gonna come back and lay the smack down on their candy asses, the Bears. And 50 was like, I was thinking, oh my goodness. And the Lions are a team like this. I call them the petty team, right? They don't know when to stop, right? If they catch a team on the wrong day, they can score 100 points, right? And you're just like, at some point, coaches start taking players out. Once you've scored, like, once it's like over 20 something points, like the difference, you start taking it a little bit easy. You've got another game to play, start taking your starters out, you start resting a bit of players. But the Lions are so petty, they're just going to keep playing all their starters, over and over and over again, and maybe throwing a few trick plays, for good measure. And I'm just like, okay, someday someone's going to get you guys, and get you guys really good. And maybe this is the team that can do that, right? The Ravens have definitely got the potential, to put 40 on anybody, including the Lions. And we've seen that the Lions can be susceptible, especially if there's a good defense on the other side of the pitch. So I'm going to be looking forward to this game. I know it's not one that we're going to be predicting, but yeah, I mean, home field advantage might be the key in this game, because I think the Ravens are at home in this game. But I think this is one that I wish was not on Monday Night Football, because it's so late. And to stay up to watch this would just be ridiculous. But
the Monday Night Footballs are very much Tuesday morning highlight watches, aren't they? Let's be honest, for us. So the other two games that we've kind of got as like ones to look out for aren't normally ones that you would kind of put as ones to watch, because you've got so far two of the potentially weaker teams in the league so far against potentially two of the better teams. But one is the Giants and the Chiefs.
Yeah.
Now, I think for me, that's interesting because, look, we talked about it when we were talking about the Cowboys game. Just gone that Giants are potentially one of the weakest teams in the league this season, and it was a must-win game for the Cowboys. If that was a must-win game for the Cowboys, this is a must-win game for the Chiefs. If the Chiefs do lose this, then it really is panic stations, because after the Giants, their next game is the Ravens. Right. So if they go in 0-3 against the Ravens, they could arguably 0-4, which would be unheard of. So the Chiefs absolutely have to come out and win this game, and let's be honest, they probably will. But that's one that I think is worth looking at. And the other one I think is worth looking at, and I'll get your thoughts on both of them shortly, again, is the Dolphins at the Bills. Again, divisional game. And I think the reason why we've got this one is because, as I mentioned before, the Dolphins lose this. They don't therefore they don't have another game for 11 days. That's a long time for a Miami Dolphins coach to sit on a 0-3 record. So what are your thoughts on some of them, or is there any other things that are standing out for you going into week 3?
Yeah, I mean, those two games are interesting for all kinds of reasons, just like you've said. So probably not go over them. I think you just can't counter the Chiefs. I know it's ridiculous to say that. When you say it, you're kind of saying to yourself, but that makes no sense. You can't keep saying you trust the Chiefs and they're 0-3. You trust the Chiefs, they're 0-4. But you just kind of have to say you trust the Chiefs because 0-4 means that they can still run the table and still have 13, or so wins, right? Which is unlikely. But yeah, that Ravens game really, really puts the kibosh, on a lot of things. But I think the things that I'm looking forward to also in week 3 is continuing to see this evolution of quarterbacks that, were dead and buried, almost seem to be coming to life, right? You've got Russell Wilson, you've got your Sam Darnold continuing his stuff from last week, Mac Jones, you've got Daniel Jones as well, which is really fascinating to see. And the fact that there's been a lot of close game in the NFL in week 2, other than, of course, the Lions that were blowing out, the Bears. But other than that, every other game, has been within, one score, or something similar in terms of winning. So I like that closeness. And I think we're saying this off air that, potentially this might be the hardest season for a team to get into 14 wins and 15 wins, just because of the way that the league is shaping up week on week.
No, absolutely. I think it's been a fascinating start to the season, and as always, we are looking forward to the next week, and I'm sure we look forward to again being back this time, same time next week, talking about it together again. But look, for now, I think let's call it time there. It's a good nearly hour and 10 minutes of us chatting away for this week. So all that leaves for me to say is, again, thank you for everyone for watching. Please, like, share, subscribe, tell your friends, tell your grandparents, tell people who like football, tell people who don't like football, whatever. Spread the across the gridiron gospel. We'll be back next week, but for now, Eddie, please take us home.
Yes, what a week week 2 was in the NFL, and it did not disappoint. Week 1 delivered, and week 2, I would say it was good. I want to see more of this, guys. And listen, if your team is sitting with the scoreboard being a little bit faulty and the points are not there, don't give up hope. It's still 2 weeks into the season. Things do happen. 0-2 teams do, get to the playoffs and potentially win the Super Bowl. The Giants have done it. The Chiefs, the Patriots have done it as well. But it's unlikely that those teams are going to do that. But we're looking forward to week 3. But don't forget, guys, hit that like and subscribe button. But more importantly, hit the notification button as well, so that you can see more and more of our UK content. But thanks for hanging with us, and we'll see you in the next episode.
See you soon.
I'm the bad guy. I'm the